And we have His Excellency, Mr. Ivan Duque, the former president of Colombia, here as well. My name is Brian O'Donnell. I'm the Director of Campaign for Nature, and I'll be your MC today. We all know that this week is so incredibly important for the planet, as world leaders have gathered here in Egypt to accelerate action on climate change. The speakers we will hear from today recognize the important synergy between nature and climate. And they have rallied behind a policy idea that can help in both the climate arena and the biodiversity arena. And that is protecting at least 30% of the world's lands and oceans in a rights-based way. I'm going to turn it over to one of the co-hosts of today's events. Ms. Patty Harris from Bloomberg Philanthropies will offer some welcoming remarks.
Thank you so much, Brian. Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. Very nice to be here. Thank you so much for your leadership and partnership in our efforts to protect the planet. And welcome, everyone. It's so great to be here this year at the COP at this important event. At Bloomberg Philanthropies, taking on environmental issues is one of our biggest priorities, driven by Mike Bloomberg's leadership and commitment to this work as UN Special Envoy for Climate Ambition and Solutions. We're also driven by the urgency of the challenges we face, and the truth is the world needs to tackle two global crises at one time: climate change and biodiversity loss. COP27 has rightly focused attention on the first, but the two really go hand in hand. Rich, healthy ecosystems on land and in the ocean capture billions of tons of carbon that would otherwise heat the planet. And successfully fighting climate change depends on protecting them. That's why Bloomberg Philanthropies is especially proud to join our partners at the Wyss Foundation and the Bezos Earth Fund in supporting Global 30 by 30 goal, protecting 30% of the world's land and ocean by 2030. And thanks to the leadership of the High Ambition Coalition, we're building important momentum. More than 100 countries and counting are now committed to reaching that goal, and local leaders from environmental organizations to indigenous peoples are helping to drive progress. At Bloomberg Philanthropies, we're working hard to advance our efforts in coastal communities and throughout the world's ocean. In late September, we committed more than $200 million in new funding focused on protecting more of the ocean. And this builds on the work we've been doing for over a decade, which has helped strengthen the protection of nearly 11 million square miles of ocean. We're improving the conservation of coral reefs, which are an essential source of biodiversity. We're tackling major threats like overfishing and pollution, and we're preserving the ecosystems that sustain coastal communities and absorb huge amounts of carbon. But as we all know, there's much more to do together. The UN's Biodiversity Conference in Montreal this December represents the next great chance for governments to accelerate progress, not just make meaningful commitments, but also to take powerful actions. This work will shape the face of the planet and the future of our climate. Reaching our 30 by 30 goal will help ensure that our planet and our future are stronger, healthier, and more sustainable for generations to come. And I'm looking forward so much to making great progress together, to everyone in this room and others beyond. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Patty. We now have the honor to welcome one of the co-chairs of the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People, the Minister of Environment and Energy from Costa Rica, Mr. Franz Tottenbach Capra.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. This is a pleasure to be here. First, I wish to thank Bloomberg, Bezos Earth Fund, and Campaign for Nature for organizing this important event. as the last high-level event on the 30-30 before the CBD COP taking place next month in Montreal. Through the high ambition for nature and people, Costa Rica, France, and the United Kingdom are co-chairs of this initiative of over 105 countries, which the main purpose is to achieve the protection and conservation of at least 30% of the planet's land and oceans by 2030 in the framework of the Convention on Biological Diversity and the post-2020 biodiversity framework. We are expecting to approve the CBD COP15 next month in Montreal. The 30-30 targets is a science-based goal and is set as the minimum measure required to halt the loss of biodiversity. In recent IPCC reports released in March stated that safeguarding biodiversity and ecosystems is fundamental to climate resilient development. In the light of the threats that climate change poses to them and their roles in adaptation and mitigation, and the highlighting the importance of effective, equitable conservation of approximately 30 to 50% of Earth's land, fresh water, and ocean areas. That is relevant due to the critical importance of the 30-30 target to maintain nature's essential services to people, the global economy, and to meet the SDGs. In the same time, the United Nations program found that conserving 30% of the land in a strategic location could safeguard 500 gigatons of carbon stored in vegetation and soils, around half of the world's vulnerable terrestrial carbon stocks, and reduce the extinction risk of nearly 9 out of 10 threatened terrestrial species. This shows the critical importance of 30 by 30 target if we are to meet the 1.5 degree Paris Agreement. And this is critical as we still want to keep the 1.5 hope. Moreover, it is crucial to underscore that we cannot safeguard the world's remaining biodiversity without partnering with and respecting the rights of knowledge of indigenous people and the local communities who often are the world's best stewards of nature. This is why we need to ensure that indigenous rights are respected, that IPLCs are engaged and as partners in the design and management of protected and conserved areas. The work that we have established through the Hack for Nature and People seeks to position the highest level of the protection of biodiversity. The large and growing global support for the 30 by 30 target, it is the most widely supported of any of the draft global biodiversity framework targets. It now has more than 100 supportive countries from all the regions of the world. In that regard, the 30 by 30 is a must-have and an essential pillar of a successful outcome in COP15 in Montreal. In this sense, Costa Rica have not only called for this global target in the multilateral arena, but also have taken a commitment of 30 by 30 at the national level and has now 30 of these maritime areas under protection. And in the case of Costa Rica, this is not small. Our marine areas are 10 times our terrestrial areas. So I wish to share with the Costa Rican case, our seas correspond to 92% of our total territory. So more or less my mathematics were correct. And we are a country whose coastal is battered by the Pacific and the Caribbean and serve as a refuge to a great number of tropical and marine species. In order to achieve the ambitious goal that we set ourselves and generate a positive impact of the planet, international cooperation and the collaboration of different actors are required. It is important to strengthen mechanisms as the GEF, as it will have a preponderant role in the mobilization of resources for the implementation of the framework, and the emphasis on the 30 by 30 target. Moreover, it is important to increase resources from all sources for biodiversity and to eliminate the subsidies that are harmful to biodiversity. Therefore, the participation of development in developing countries as partners in implementation, and the role of development banks and private enterprises and international philanthropies in substantial is substantial and necessary, as well as the role of civil society are the articulators in the process of conjunction with governments. In the margins of the high-level week of the United Nations in New York, we launched the next steps of the hack, more known as the Hack 2.0. The coalition is aiming to move one step further and will focus on the 30 by 30 implementation beyond COP15, supporting the actions such as mapping and sharing resources mobilization opportunities with donor countries, multilateral funders, and private philanthropic entities, and supporting countries to get the 30 by 30 through capacity building and knowledge sharing projects. Hack 2.0 represents this momentum to implement 30 by 30 that we didn't see after the ACI area-based targets, including new financial commitments, including those from philanthropic community, and a recognition of the essential role indigenous peoples and local communities play in the success of a 30 by 30. Before finishing, I would like to thank Bloomberg Campaign for Nature and the Bezos Earth Fund for becoming Hack 2.0 partners and for all their support for the last 3 years with the work of the hack. Our sights are set on achieving an ambitious post-2020 GBF at the CBD COP15 next December, and we're looking forward to collaborate with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. We are now honored to have the other co-chair of the High Ambition Coalition, Mr. Christophe Béchoux from France, join us and give some remarks.
Mesdames et messieurs, I guess there is a translation system, so I was supposed to have a speech in French, but if no one has any translator, I begin to think I would have to make it in English. Or you all understand perfectly French and you don't need any translation. And so it's like an ideal world. But apparently it's the first solution. You don't have any translator.
We do have a translator over here, yes. It is being translated.
Oh, okay. Okay. I try to do it without any support because my speech was in French and I am not a very good direct translator. No, it's a casual event. And I will speak with my heart and my English, which is the biggest problem, my English, not my heart. But I will try. First of all, I want to thank, of course, the Bloomberg and the Bezos Foundations. Thank you so much for supporting all these events and for helping us to prepare the COP15. If a stranger comes just currently in this pavilion, he could be very surprised because the subject is not the global warming, but everything is connected. We can't fight against the global warming if we have a dead angle, which is the biodiversity. Because biodiversity is threatened by the global warming, and biodiversity is one of our best weapons to fight against global warming. And the difficulty is to connect these two fights. It's the spirit of the coalition we launched with Costa Rica and with my friend, the Minister Franz Pappenbach-Carpra. At the beginning, 1 year ago, we were 50 countries. Currently, we are 105 countries with this ideal to defend the 30 by 30 in 2030. That is easy in English to say that. But it's difficult to convince other countries we need it. 30% of the land, 30% of the sea, with a high-level protection. It's like we decide to continue on 70% of the land and 70% of the sea to do as usual. So it's not a huge effort, but it's a necessary effort, because nature is very, very resilient, but humanity is very, very aggressive. And if we don't create some sanctuary, we won't manage to succeed in fighting efficiently against global warming. So it was just my message. Please help us find new country to join us. We need in Montreal to be not only 105, but 120, 150, 160, and to manage to obtain this agreement to establish a high-level protection for 1/3 of this planet to defend all the rest of humanity and biodiversity. Thank you so much.
Thank you for those inspiring words, Minister. I'll now welcome Ms. Monica Medina, Assistant Secretary for Oceans, International, Environmental, and Scientific Affairs from the Department of State in the U.S., and also has a new title, Special Envoy for Biodiversity and Water Resources. Welcome, Monica.
Thank you so much, Brian. And boy, is that a hard act to follow. I'm going to try my best in English, too, and I'll see if I do okay. But I will also and if there was ever an epicenter of nature and biodiversity, we are, you know, on the continent that is it. And we all know the things that people have said already. This is a crucial time. Science is pointing us in this direction unmistakably. There is no question. Last year, the IPCC's report on climate change impacts, adaptation, and vulnerability spoke to the fact that not only do we need 30%, but one of the other speakers mentioned we need 30 to 50%. So by aiming for 30%, we're already aiming at the least ambitious target we can, and it seems like it's challenging for us to reach. So if I had one key message first, it's that 30% is on the low end of what we need. So we have to be extra inspired, super inspired to get to that 30%. And we have this upcoming COP on biodiversity where hopefully we will adopt that North Star, that 30% as our North Star, like 1.5 degrees Celsius is the Paris Agreement North Star. The second thing we have to do is make countries willing to make this contribution themselves. And we have a coalition of our own that we're trying to build of countries that are willing to create protection within their own EEZs in the ocean of up to 30% in their own. It's easy to promise 30% when it's always somewhere else, out there on the high seas, beyond areas of national jurisdiction. But I have to commend Costa Rica and the many other countries that have, Colombia, others that and Ecuador that have promised to do 30% or already achieved it. And hats off to both of the former presidents who are here. A huge fan of your conservation advocacy, and you are tremendous leaders and inspiration for all of us still in government, still trying to work away at it. And so finally, the third point I want to make is that we need the private sector and philanthropies, particularly in this space where we don't have clear signals from a market as to what nature is valued at. We haven't worked out yet all the calculations about how to conserve nature through markets and market forces. We know we need to do that. We need companies to step up and make voluntary pledges to do what they can to start to conserve nature, and we need these philanthropic organizations. So hats off to Bloomberg, to Mies, to the Campaign for Nature, to all of the philanthropic organizations that are, and Bezos Earth Fund, I know, Andrew, you're here, to all of the philanthropic organizations that are stepping up right now to make up this gap in this critical moment when we can't afford not to be conserving nature. So I guess the bottom line is, and I'll always remember, President Duque, your speech at the UN Ocean Conference, and you brought your son with you, and it was so lovely. When I think about why we are doing this, why we have to continue to push hard, it's for our children and our grandchildren. We cannot leave them a planet devoid of nature. We cannot leave them a planet that won't sustain them, not only in their ability to have the natural resources they need to make a living or to be able to continue society as we know it, but just to be able to breathe and to drink clean water. We have to leave them an earth that's in balance and that can sustain them and their children and their grandchildren. And I know that's what indigenous communities think about. I know we have to include as many people in this conversation as we possibly can. And we in the US, since we sit outside this convention, can especially relate to those who are not at the table, who need a voice. And we will use our best efforts to bring every voice to the table that needs to be there. So just want to say thank you all for being here. Thank you, Brian, and everyone who is working this week and next week to ensure that in a month we have a very, very successful COP15 on top of a successful COP27. So thanks again for giving me a chance to talk, and I hope I didn't let down my fellow English speakers.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll hear from Nigeria. I know the minister is running a little bit late, but we have Engineer Musa here, who is the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Environment and Climate Change, who will be speaking. Oh, excuse me, Minister, 1 second. We will invite. We have President Whips has just joined us from Palau, so we want to. I know he's been running late between meetings, and we're honored to have him join us today. So, President Whips, why don't we turn to you and have you say a few remarks. Welcome. Yes. I know you're running late in between meetings, so we'll let you have the floor.
My apologies. We actually kind of got lost, so it's a big venue, and it does take time to get around. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the Bloomberg Philanthropies, the Bezos Earth Fund, Wise Campaign for Nature for hosting this event to discuss the critical role of protecting and conserving at least 30% of the world's lands and 30% of the world's oceans, and how they play a role in contributing to reducing global warming to keep it below 1.5. Of course, this week, leaders from all over the world are gathering to deliver on the promises of the Paris Agreement and to turn the negotiations finally into implementation. The commitments to be made this week should include the goal of achieving and the commitment to achieve 30 by 30. As a large ocean state, Palau knows that ocean action is climate action. Protecting 30% of the world's ocean is a manageable target for all countries, and we should not entertain any excuses on achieving that goal. We can't afford excuses. No nation represented in this room can say that. We're all seeing the impact of climate change on our homelands and our lives daily. What more if we don't take action today? Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, during the 7th Our Ocean Conference, which we hosted in Palau, there were 400 commitments by non-state actors that pledged 16.35 billion. We are encouraged by the world's willingness to commit to immediate and collective climate action. We all need to live up to those commitments. Since then, Palau has launched a comprehensive Blue Prosperity Plan. This plan strives for a 100% sustainably managed ocean, which includes the development of sustainable fisheries, restorative aquaculture, high-value tourism, and innovative business models that are all designed to deliver the optimal economic growth while protecting Palau's ecological resources. Over the next several years, we will work with partners to better understand our vital habitats in our waters worthy of high-level protection, while identifying key spawning grounds and migratory routes of valuable fish stocks. The Blue Prosperity Plan is built on a stakeholder-inclusive, science-based, data-driven marine spatial planning process, which builds off Palau's National Marine Sanctuary, which was created in 2015. Through this plan, Palau is committed to growing regional cooperation for a 100% management of the Pacific Ocean as we move collectively toward our global ambition of 30 by 30. Palau continues to take steps to protect our ocean and our lands, and we cannot do this alone. We must act together. Acting together includes holding developed countries accountable for their role in the climate crisis and urging those countries to fulfill their promises to the climate finance commitment of 100 billion and the commitment to reducing global carbon emissions. However, those commitments will not be enough. We will need to support the support of the public and 3030 and ultimately a 100% sustainably managed Pacific Ocean. Palau and other small island developing states cannot and should not shoulder the burden of protecting the world oceans and lands alone. It is time for the world to take responsibility and act so that we are all able to protect and preserve our planet for the generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Whips, for those inspiring words. We'll now turn to the Federal Republic of Nigeria, where Engineer H. Musa, the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Environment and Climate Change, will offer some remarks. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I would like to welcome all high dignitaries, excellencies, and our media here. The Honorable Minister of Environment, who is also the leader of the delegation from Nigeria, is right now attending another meeting, so he has directed me to present his speech. I'm honored to bring greetings to you from Nigeria as we gather together to highlighting the critical role in protecting and conserving at least 30% of the world's lands and oceans plays in helping to deliver the Paris Agreement's goal. The African continent is more vulnerable to climate change than any other. In the ECOWAS region, I'm proud to inform you all that ECOWAS countries have reached a consensus to support the ambitious target of protecting 30% of our lands and oceans by 2030 as essential to mitigate climate change and biodiversity loss. But this, ladies and gentlemen, is only part of the solution. We must unite to ensure that our call for ambition for expansion of protected areas is matched with equal ambition on finance. Nigeria and other ECOWAS member nations are leading the way. Our appeal for ambitious global response to biodiversity crisis is urgent and focused. Through this urgent appeal, we have identified several measures as essential, including the global designation of 30% of land or oceans areas as protected by 2030. By the conclusion of robust new high seas treaty, the establishment of highly and fully protected areas covering 30% of global ocean, which prohibit environmentally damaging activities, and a global commitment towards immediately halting human-induced extension of wild species. We can no longer afford to lose our momentum in endless debate when solutions are right in front of us. I would like to thank the organizers, and I hope our meetings will bring more fruitful deliberations in the nearest future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Nigeria, and really incredible to hear that announcement of the entire ECOWAS region endorsing 30 by 30, a huge, huge milestone and incredible leadership from the nations of Western Africa. We all know that in order for 30 by 30 to be properly achieved, it must be done in a rights-based way that ensures the leadership and the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities are upheld and respected. Most of the world's remaining biodiversity is concentrated on the lands that are stewarded and the waters that are stewarded by indigenous peoples and local communities. To speak more on this topic, I'm pleased to welcome Jennifer Tolley-Corpuz, who is both the policy director at Neotero and a leader with the International Indigenous Forum for Biodiversity. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you very much to Bloomberg Philanthropies and the Bezos Earth Fund for organizing this. It's important to make the connection between nature and climate change, and I think previous speakers have done so. But if we are talking about protecting the places where most of the carbon stocks can be found and where the areas most important for biodiversity are located, we cannot overlook indigenous peoples and local communities. 40%, 30 to 40% of the land, of global land, is customarily governed by indigenous peoples. So just recognizing indigenous peoples' tenure and customary tenure over these territories will already bring us to 30%. Many scientific studies, in fact, it is no longer in dispute. The IPCC, IPBES, and many other global assessments have found that supporting indigenous people's tenure is the best way to address land degradation. Tapping into indigenous knowledge is the best way to address climate change. And it is the best way to make sure that, that biodiversity is protected. In fact, 40% of indigenous people's territories are found to be crucial for biodiversity, whether or not they are found within protected areas. Therefore, as we talk about 30 by 30, we should go beyond the numerical element, and we should look at the quality of these areas that need to be protected. We have heard an argument for effectiveness, but I would like to highlight equity as well. We cannot allow the legacy of protected areas where indigenous peoples have been displaced by fortress conservation to continue. We need to invest in the people who are committed to protecting their territories, their resources, even at the cost of their own lives. Many recent studies about financing have been released in recent months. There are findings that 270% annually has been devoted to tenure and forest management. However, only 17% of this amount has gone directly to indigenous peoples. The IPLC pledge, which also goes to protection of forest tenure of indigenous peoples and land tenure, has found that only a small amount, I have my notes here, have found that only 19% has gone to indigenous peoples directly. We have to increase this because of these small numbers that have been reported. It does not include the implementation cost, administrative costs. So can you imagine if the resources are going directly to indigenous peoples, how much more indigenous peoples can be doing to resist activities that degrade indigenous peoples' lands and to continue to protect the land to make so that we can make sure that our planet is turned over in a healthy state to future generations. So let us protect those who are most invested in protecting nature. Let us protect indigenous peoples. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jing. I would now like to welcome Mr. Andrew Steer, who is the CEO of the Bezos Earth Fund and one of the co-hosts and partners of this event. Andrew.
Thank you, Brian, very much indeed. Wow, what a year it's been, hey? You think, beginning of last year, what were there? Maybe 50 countries had signed up to this idea, and a lot of them weren't really sure what it meant. Now 109 countries, totally inspiring. And I'd like to begin with 2 points. One, I just want to agree with what Jennifer just said. This is so important. The analysis is so clear now that giving tenure and the right to protect that tenure for indigenous people on a community-based basis will dramatically improve conservation. So thank you very much. Second, I really want to honor the national leaders here today. The reason that we in the philanthropic business are so enthusiastic and coming up with significant amounts of money is because we believe the leadership you are providing. And President Whips, the fact you're making an announcement today, that is so cool. You hosted a brilliant ocean conference earlier. You're trying to get other countries. We're supporting you in that. What Nigeria announced today. Thank you to the two co-chairs, France and Costa Rica. Terrific. Thank you, Ethiopia. And President Duque, you're going to have a word in a minute, but my goodness me, what you have done it has been totally remarkable. And think about the last year. We, just a year ago, announced as a group of philanthropists $5 billion for conservation, because we believe that this time is right. We believe that we could identify the leadership in the key countries that we wanted to work in, and we were able to inject funds and engagement in a way that would make a huge difference. And over the last year, the $1 billion that the Bezos Earth Fund announced at COP26, we've dispersed already over 300 million of that 1 billion. And the reason for that is not that we're loose with, you know, the checkbook. No, it's because there are some fantastic projects and programs and commitments from the top of government to those who dwell in forests, to fishing communities, and so we are thrilled to be part of that. I do want to thank also the British government for putting this item on the agenda so clearly at the last COP. I think that was a pivot point in terms of understanding that conservation, climate change are not two separate issues, they are two sides of the same coin. So thank you for coming today. It is not the end. We're about to hand over to a couple of other world leaders, but we'd like to thank you for the partnership and relationship that we have with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I now, as Andrew had mentioned, we are honored to have His Excellency President Duque here with us today. President Duque in Colombia really set an example for how a nation can achieve 30 by 30 and even 30 before 30. And so we're honored by your leadership and grateful for all you did when you were president, and welcome, and please offer some remarks.
Thank you so much, Brian, and thank you all, Excellency, President, Ministers, Special Representatives, Patty, great to see you. It's great to see you, Andrew. And I'm delighted to be here this afternoon because I certainly believe in serendipities of life. And there's no coincidence that we're going to have two major events in the next 8 weeks. Today and this week with the COP27, and obviously next week. But we'll see very soon the discussions that are also going to take place in Montreal. And I think there are two concepts that are going to come together very strong. The concept of carbon neutrality that we have been working so hard for so many years, but also the concept of nature positive. So I see these two COPs not as separate events, but as Siamese sisters or brothers. And it is very important to say that why uniting these two concepts makes a difference is because the second most dangerous cause of emissions in the world is deforestation. And deforestation is destructing different ecosystems around the world. And we have to acknowledge that if, for example, we decided to shut down all the energy that we consume out of fossil fuels, we'll still be lagging to meet the target that we have towards 2030 and 2050. So it is crucial, it is pivotal that at this moment in time, we are able to recover and to protect the areas of the world that guarantee the life of species, especially because in the last 40 years, we have lost almost 69% of wildlife. And because we can certainly say that 1 million species are under threat. So the best way to do it, to find one indicator that as long as carbon neutrality can help us achieve what we want to achieve, is to declare protected areas. And that's why 30 by 30 is so meaningful. But I have to say this, if we can do it earlier, we shall, we must. And the case of Colombia clearly demonstrates that it's possible when there's political willingness and also if you have the right partners. We signed the High Ambition Coalition. We declared as a country that we wanted to get to 30 by 30. But we accelerated, and by August this year, we reached 34% of the Colombian territory declared a protected area. And it was done hand in hand with multiple partners. I have to highlight today not only the support by the British government and especially Lord Zach Goldsmith, that was such an enduring friend in this cause. But I also want to thank the Bezos Earth Fund. Andrew, Christian, thank you, because you clearly said, if you do it, we'll support you with resources. And you'll match what the Colombian government is doing. And that is something that has made a big difference. And when this coalition for nature, and I want to say this, Brian, we want to keep on bringing more countries to do the same. We expect that by Montreal we'll have new countries in Latin America, as we are receiving today more countries in Africa. And I also want to connect that objective with something that is very important that is going to happen this week, and is the development of a voluntary carbon market for Africa, where conservation projects are going to be available for buyers. And that will open the possibility that with biodiversity credits, we are going to be able to give resources and allow local communities, allow rural communities, indigenous communities also to earn a living by embracing all these causes. I want to thank the Costa Rican government and the French government for leading this High Ambition Coalition. And as we have said it, we can do it if we have the political willingness. We did it in Colombia, and we want more countries in the world to replicate it. The right way is putting the money where the mouth is, but most importantly, putting the political action hand in hand with the environmental ambition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Duque. We are now honored to be joined by the Right Honorable Lord Zach Goldsmith, who is the Minister of State, Foreign Commonwealth and Development office in the UK, which I probably didn't get exactly right, but yes, but welcome. Also the UK, I want to make sure everyone knows, is a co-chair of the High Ambition Coalition for Oceans, and has been a key leader on getting to 30 by 30 globally. Thank you, Minister Jones.
Thank you so much. The introduction, I mean, the thing is, things change so much in the UK. I don't even know anymore, but I'm still there. I'm like a cockroach. Nothing's going to get rid of me. It is wonderful to follow President Duque because, as most of you, probably all of you know, he is the champion for nature, a global voice, incredible track record, as he described and as others have described in the past. So it is a real honor to follow you, and I thank you for all the work you did in your time as president, but also what you've done since. As you continue to champion these issues. This is not political for you, this is not a box-ticking thing, this is something that comes from your heart. That's very obvious to all of us who've worked with you, so thank you so much. Before I should say thank you to Brian as well. The Campaign for Nature is just the most wonderful organization. Thank you for putting this event on, thank you for everything you've done to pull this coalition together, and Rita, who's just disappeared around the corner from the High Ambition Coalition. Like a dream team, doing wonderful things. So look, we're here at COP27, and the headline obviously is that we're here to try and agree measures to tackle climate change. And in a few weeks' time, we head off to Montreal, many of us, and there our job is to tackle the challenge of nature destruction. But we know that the two are completely, inextricably, inseparably linked. You cannot break the two. And it was a point that President Duque just made, but it's the point I hope that we landed forever at COP26, where we brought nature from the margins of the global climate debate and put it right at the heart. Because we know that there is no pathway to net zero, there is no credible solution to climate change that does not involve nature. You know, we can have as much solar power as you want, we can be as energy efficient as we want, we can close down every coal plant, but if we don't protect the world's critical ecosystems, forests in particular, but not just forests, mangroves and the rest, then it really is game over for all of us. And just to put it in context from a climate point of view, around a quarter of emissions come from land degradation. If I put it another way, if you took the package that we secured at COP26 on forests, and if all those promises are honored, and we're absolutely committed to making sure they are, but if they're all honored, that represents 10% of what we need to do to get to where we need to be at 2030. Even though it wasn't formally part of the UNFCCC process, that forest package alone was worth 10%. So this COP that we're at the moment is really about consolidation. It's about delivering those promises. It's about proving to a skeptical public, and a rightly skeptical public, that when we make promises, we will keep them. It's about building momentum. But it's also about building a pathway to a successful CBD COP, because that CBD COP in Montreal absolutely must be the Paris moment for nature. We're using that phrase now all the time, but it really must be the Paris moment. It must be the turning point. It must put us on a path to recovery this decade. And a big part of that is getting the world to agree this 30 by 30 target. I would love it if we could agree 30 before 30, but I'm not going to hold my breath. But if we can agree 30 by 30 at Montreal, that will be a massive step, because all the evidence tells us that protecting a minimum of 30% of the world's ecosystems will help turn the tide on extinctions and on environmental degradation. And obviously that matters in and of itself. It is a tragedy when we hear about declining ecosystems, about species going extinct, never to be returned. In my lifetime, we're told that populations of wild animals have gone down by about half. I mean, that's not even a blink from an evolutionary point of view. When we hear, as I heard yesterday, that 70% of all the world's birds are actually farm birds, it really puts it into context. But even if you put all that heartbreaking news to one side, it's more than that. It's a catastrophe for human beings as well, because everything we have, everything we need, and everything we will need comes from the natural world. There is no technological substitute for a forest or mangroves or seagrass or a coral reef. It simply doesn't exist. I'll give you one example, is the Congo Basin. If the Congo Basin were to be wiped out, as it is being, about 500,000 hectares every single year, that would have the effect of at least halving rainfall across the continent of Africa, possibly much more than that. And the effect of that on agriculture, on livelihoods, on poverty is unconscionable. We'd have a humanitarian crisis on a scale that we've never even had to think of, let alone cope with before. So this really is central. There is nothing more important than this challenge that we're here today to help address. So in addition to all of that, of course, there's the need, we make it sound trite, but the need to tackle climate change. And it's through nature that we find the solutions to help countries adapt to climate change. President Duque, on his watch, embarked on one of the world's biggest restoration programs of mangroves. And it's a wonderful thing to do. We like mangroves. They encourage biodiversity. They provide nesting grounds and breeding grounds for fish. But the reason that project was initiated was because it came on the back of record storms to hit Colombia. And the Colombian government discovered, with Carlos Correa, his environment minister, that those areas, those communities that were built in areas where mangroves and coral reefs had been grubbed out were destroyed. The areas where mangroves and coral reefs still existed, they were still battered, of course, but they were not destroyed. So this is an insurance policy as well as everything else, and it's a wonderful program that you set up, President Duque. So the CBD is no less important than the climate COP. It may get less headlines, but it is no less important. You could even argue that it is more important. And I'm so happy to have the job, the honor today of giving you a snapshot of where we've got to with 30 by 30, because I think it is the case. I've been scribbling notes just before I came on, and I hope to get the numbers right. I believe we now have 112 countries formally and publicly signed up in support of 30 by 30. We heard from Nigeria that the 15 countries of ECOWAS have signed up. In addition to that number, we've got countries that are just about to sign up. We've got Samoa, Palau, Fiji, Tonga. We've got, I just come from meetings with representatives from Malaysia and Guyana, both of whom were happy, ministers, were happy for me to say that they're on the cusp of signing 30 by 30. They're going to sign 30 by 30. They just haven't signed on the dotted line yet, but they're going to. And then we know that the Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, and others are also on the cusp of signing. So that number is impressive, 112, and I take my hat off to President Duque, to Rita, to Brian, to everyone else involved in this, to Andrew Steer, what a great hero. I don't know whether he's spoken yet, but what a great hero he is. I take my hat off to all of you. But 112 is actually not an honest reflection of where we've got to. That number is bigger. But by the time we leave Montreal, that number's got to be complete. We need the world to agree that target. And then we need to get on and deliver it. And with your help, I have no doubt we will. Thank you all so much. Thank you. I'll get the numbers right.
Thank you, Lord Goldsmith, for that incredibly exciting announcement. We have seen big momentum building here. And as we conclude our event, a few final notes. Know that there is no climate ambition without nature ambition. There is no nature ambition without climate ambition. These issues must be tackled together. And that's why on the first day of this COP, with this high-level leadership, we can see that there are leaders who are showing us the path to bring the nature solutions into climate and the climate solutions into nature together so that we have a hopeful future. We haven't had a lot of hope lately. We've had a lot of dark news, a lot of grim news, but 30 by 30 is a policy that can give us hope. It can give us local communities working together. It can help us work in a better way with the leadership of indigenous peoples to show a path forward, of new path for conservation. So I am grateful for the leaders, the world leaders who are here today, who are showing the way and inspiring young people that they are taking these cries for help seriously. They are making policy differences. We are counting on you in Montreal to bring this over the finish line. We have 112 countries, still more to go, but please all join us in celebrating 30 by 30, in encouraging that we get this finished in just a few short weeks in Montreal, and that nature remains part of the climate agenda here in Egypt. Thank you all for attending today.